Hello, this is Dr. Kevin Garrison with a final lecture on user-centered technology and education. Now, up to this point, we've talked about how we can make education more user-centered by, first of all, changing our technologies and the design of those technologies, by changing our understanding of how our students learn, and by changing our interfaces to be more effectively designed. So I'm going to suggest something that's a little more out there for our final lecture. Something that is not wildly heralded or universally accepted, but I think is something that we should grapple with. And it's this: that we can create more user-centered education via gamification. Now, everybody's familiar with games. Everybody knows what a game is. Pool, racquetball, ping pong, basketball, football, board games like Monopoly or Chutes and Ladders, or video games like Zelda or Mario Kart, things like that. We all know what a game is when we see it. We're not talking about changing education to be a game. We're talking about finding the similar elements between the system of education and games, and drawing out of games what exactly are similar to education so that we can make education more game-like. If we're talking about gamification, we're not talking about a couple of things. First of all, we're not talking about incorporating games into a classroom. So in other words, we're not saying like what I do in my my advanced classes. When we get close to a midterm, I usually have the student play a game to study. Group A versus Group B, the males versus the females. You set it up in a class, and then you give them a whole bunch of things to study. You give them team names, and then you get points on the board, and the winner gets a bonus point on the exam, kind of thing. That's a way of making education a game. But we're not talking about that. Nor are we talking about this idea of just making things fun. Here's an example. I found this over the weekend. A fantastic little site that reconceptualized the periodic table of elements to be something a little less boring. In other words, it's not this massive table of a whole bunch of numbers and letters and words, but rather it turns it into visual elements, colors. It has designed elements that match up with the text down here. We're going to say something like helium is a non-reactive element in the lightest of the noble gases. We see this guy levitating and we think, hey, that's pretty cool. Maybe that's going to stick in my head a little bit better. This guy levitates just like helium balloons levitate. And so hopefully it sticks a little bit better. But we're not talking about that in terms of gamification. What we're talking about is this: what are the common elements of games, and how can we apply that to a system like education? Now, to do that, I'm going to draw heavily from one of the best books on this subject ever written, Jane McGonigal's Reality is Broken, Why Games Make Us Better and How They Can Change the World. 2011 publication. If you haven't read it, put it on your Amazon wish list. Fantastic book. Gives some amazing insights into why people like games so much and why we waste so many hours playing them. I think the most recent estimate was that a high school graduate has played something like 10,000 hours of video games by the time they graduate. It's an insane number. People love games. I grew up in the age of video games. I mean, I had a Nintendo when I was a kid, so I do play games even to this day. My parents play games. I think everybody on some level plays games. So what is it that draws us into games, and what is the uniting common elements? Well, she has several chapters. I'm going to give you some of the 5 more common ones. The most interesting one to me is this one: unnecessary obstacles. A great example of that is golf. You can't get anything more unnecessary than golf. Here's a hole, here's a ball, try to get the ball into the hole. Now that in and of itself is simple. My 18-month-old daughter can play the game of golf. You give her a ball and you give her a hole and you give her a stick to whack it in there, she can do that. But that's not why it's fun. That's not what makes it a game. What makes it a game is these artificial rules that you create surrounding the game. That is, you're trying to get the ball into the hole in as few shots as possible. And in fact, I'm going to go after you, and so now it becomes a competition between the two of us. And so you create an unnecessary obstacle, and all of a sudden it turns it into a game. There's got to be some element of winning and failing. So you fail, you get better, you fail again, you get a little bit better, and then finally at some point you win, and then in the process you level up. A good example of this would be the most recent game, Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is a fantastic game primarily because it throws this little character into this huge world where you're trying to beat the big bad guy at the end, who's taken over the kingdom. And you start off with a very limited amount of anything, specifically health. You have 3 hearts, and these hearts go down quickly if you hit any enemy. And so the way that you get more hearts is by going to these shrines, doing these puzzles, and then if you get 4 shrines completed, then you get an extra heart. And if you get enough hearts, then in theory you become not invincible, but it sure as heck not as easily beatable as when you first started the game. So 4 shrines equals 1 heart. You feel like you've leveled up every time you get another heart. There's usually an epic sense of scale and epic winning involved, despite the fact that it's really not. Here's an example. My student and I, one of my friends, played an intramurals racquetball tournament, men's doubles, and we won. I have now a T-shirt that says "I am an intramurals champion," and I have my picture taken that's going to be put into the UREC at some point. I was very proud of that moment. The final game was very epic. It felt very epic, even if it actually wasn't. It's just a Division II university, small intramurals doubles racquetball tournament, right? But it felt much bigger than that. We played the final championship game at 9 o'clock at night, and it took us 2 hours and 15 minutes. The longest intramurals game I've ever played, the longest anything I've ever played. 2 hours and 15 minutes. I was exhausted by the end of it. My student was exhausted at the end of it. We went out to IHOP afterwards, like shoveling food into our face because I'm so tired. But it felt so epic. Even though all you get is a picture and a T-shirt, but it's one of those things that I feel I'm gonna remember many years from now and go, yeah, that was me back in the day. I played an intramurals racquetball tournament and won. So it feels epic. Good games usually have intrinsic rewards as opposed to extrinsic rewards. The difference is simple. An extrinsic motivator is something that's external to ourselves, something like money or fame or good looks. Those are very fleeting, and studies have shown they don't make us happy. What makes us happy is to get intrinsic rewards. And this happens usually by doing things like in a game environment. You feel like you've gone up against an unnecessary obstacle, you've won, you've leveled up, and it feels very epic, and therefore you get this sense of success, even though it is all very artificial. Money goes away pretty quickly, especially when you have an 18-month-old daughter. And then last but not least, just the connectivity factor. When you're playing racquetball, intramurals, or with a lot of other people. When you're playing online, you're talking with some people. I like to play online with my cousin. And, we join together in a team to take on the zombies, and you feel like you're getting a social interaction despite the fact that you're not actually face-to-face with that person, but you're having a conversation with them. So, if this is what makes a game, unnecessary obstacles and challenges, you fail, you get a little better, you fail again, you get a little better, and finally you get strong enough to accomplish something and you level up. It feels very epic, it draws upon intrinsic rewards, and connects you with other people. If that's what makes a good game, then how can we create something like education to be a game? Well, first let's examine how this works in a game-like environment, and then we'll talk about how it works in a non-gaming environment. Take this as an example. This is the most ridiculous game that has ever been created. It's called Cookie Clicker. It works like this. You click the cookie. You excited yet? I have my students play this in my usability class, and they get really bored very fast with it. Except for the students who figure out what the purpose of the game is. The purpose of the game is not to click the cookie. The purpose of the game is you finally get enough cookies that you go, oh, I can buy something over here. Now what do you buy? You can buy a cursor. And what does it do? It auto-clicks once every 10 seconds. So you click it, and now notice what happens. I've got cookies per second at 0.1, and every 10 seconds I get another cookie. which is pretty cool. Right now it's at 85, 2, 1, 86 cookies, and I haven't done a darn thing. So now if I get up to say 100 cookies, I can buy a grandma who bakes me cookies. And now all of a sudden my clicks per second jumps up to 1.1. Keep clicking. You can buy another cursor. Now we're up to 1.2. You'll notice that I'm unlocking achievements. There's 252 achievements to unlock, and you can spend a ridiculous amount of time doing this. Now, why is this game so popular? It seems absurd. You're making cookies that are not real, that you can't eat. Why? Just to increase your clicks per second. Here's why it works. First of all, it's an unnecessary obstacle. How quickly can I increase and escalate my clicks per second? I don't need to do that, but I want to because it's a challenge. I want to see if I can get a higher number. You level up. Obviously, every time you buy a grandma, you now have 2 grandmas. Now I have 3 grandmas. So every time you buy something, you feel like you're getting stronger and faster and better. It's got an epic sense of scale. I've been playing Cookie Clicker for well over a year now, and I can tell you that my clicks per second is over 1 octillion per second. I can tell you you're not going to make 1 octillion cookies per second in reality. So the game gives you this feeling of epic senses of scale. You're making a lot more cookies than you could actually do in the real world. It's built on intrinsic rewards. Obviously, you don't get any cookies by playing Cookie Clicker. You don't get any money by playing it. So it's all built on intrinsic rewards. You just feel like you've accomplished something. Hey, I'm up to 1 octillion per second. And I used to go home to my wife and say, so I'm up to X number of cookie clicks in Cookie Clicker, and she would listen and smile. And it also has a very cool sense of a surprise element. One of the things that Anderson talks about. You'll see things pop up at random moments, like golden cookies that you can click. And my favorite thing is in the Christmas season, you have reindeer pop across the screen. You're supposed to click them, and then you get extra cookies from the reindeer. But, little cool things like that keep drawing you back, despite the fact that all you're fundamentally doing is clicking a bunch of cookies. And last but not least, it's got a social connection to it. When I play Cookie Clicker, I have a number of other friends who play it, and so we're always kind of bragging about, how many clicks per second are you up to, or have you found the dragon yet, or how many golden cookies have you clicked, that kind of stuff. That's how it works in a gaming environment. How does it work in a non-gaming environment? Well, let me give you an example. A year and a half ago, I bought this little guy. It's a Garmin Vivo Active. Currently $150 on Amazon. All it is a glorified pedometer. You connect it to your phone via Bluetooth, and it syncs, and you can. It sort of serves as a smartwatch. More than anything else, it's just a pedometer. It counts your number of steps every time you walk during the day. Now here's how it turns it into a game. The app gives you the data that allows you to act in a very game-like way. For instance, it gives you an artificial number that you're supposed to match up to every day. This is an unnecessary obstacle. You don't need to do this. But you see this number, like here's my number for a couple of days back, 7,237. You see that number and you go, I've got to get to that. I'm currently at 5,009. I got to walk another 2,200 steps. And so it gives you an unnecessary obstacle, and you feel like you have to accomplish that. And if you do, you quote-unquote level up. Here's how you level up. You can see here that this is 30 days worth of data. Every time you see an orange bar, it means that I've gone over my step count. Anytime you see a blue bar, it means I was under. I feel like I've leveled up when I go several days in a row. And it gives it this grand sense of epic scale by showing me 30 days worth of data. And a few times in my life, I've gone in some really long streaks. This one ended at 11 before I hurt myself and had to slow down. But my longest streak is 19 days. And so when I hit a 10 or 11 streak, I'm like, man, I'm getting close to my longest streak. I want to hit 19 days in a row again. And so it draws you in with these artificial rewards. And you don't need to, but my wife can testify that if I'm 50 steps away at the end of the day, I'll be standing by the side of the bed just marching in place, getting that pedometer working, so that I'll end up with my designated number of steps in the evening. Or she can testify, I'll go out for a walk at 11:30 at night barefoot because I need another 1,000 steps and I got to go a half mile to get it. So it forces people to walk, which is what it's trying to do. This is I designed to make you live a more healthy lifestyle. It's not designed to make you walk so much that you get injured, but it is designed to try to get you moving, and it succeeds on that level. And then last but not least, here you'll see this social connectivity aspect of it. Pretty cool. It connects you to other people, shows what their numbers are. You feel like you're always in a competition. This week, for instance, I'm in a 50,000 step challenge to see if I can reach the top number. Right now I'm in 6th place with 0 steps. I haven't synced for the day. But, the top place person is already at 13,000 with six more days to go. They're likely going to win. This is an example of gamification. This is not a game. This is not a game. This is a real-life element, a pedometer that gives me numbers about my health and my fitness level that I can then use to make better educated choices about how I want to live. But they've turned it into a game-like environment by drawing upon these things, such as unnecessary obstacles. It gives you, here's the number you need to reach today, by giving you a sense of leveling up, an epic sense of scale by having multiple days of data in a row, by drawing upon that intrinsic reward of feeling like I had success this week. I went 11 days in a row, meeting my step count, and then connecting with other people who are in a similar challenge. And so it works. Now here's the big thesis that people have grappled with, and it just hasn't really taken off too well. And it's this question: is higher education a type of game? And more importantly, if it is, can we gamify it? The answer to both those questions is absolutely yes. Let's break that down. Let's go back to the 5 things that a game does. Sorry, the recorder screwed up there a second. Where was I? Talk about how education can be gamified. Here's how. Notice that education by default is a type of game. It starts off with unnecessary obstacles. When you walk into a classroom and a professor hands you a syllabus, you look at the syllabus and it's full of unnecessary obstacles. You need to come to class this many times this semester. It's an arbitrary number. You could raise it, you could lower it. You need to turn in the following assignment this semester. You need to have the following things for this assignment. You need 1,000 words for this one, 500 for this one. You need to do a presentation this semester. It gives you a whole bunch of challenges that you're supposed to match up to. They're all unnecessary. They could be changed. But if you match up with all those obstacles and you do a good job, then you get to quote-unquote level up. You get 3 credit hours and a grade that attaches to your GPA. And if you do enough of them, then you get to level up from a freshman to a sophomore. You got 30 hours, you've done 10 classes, now you're a sophomore. You've gone 60 hours, now you're a junior. 90 hours, you're a senior. You got 120 hours, you've got a diploma. And it's all unnecessary. It's all very artificial, but it keeps leveling you up so you get closer and closer and closer to the finish line, and you feel like it's getting more and more, and this is the big sense, more and more epic as you get closer. Even though it's not, because at the end of it you just get a piece of paper. And you walk across the stage and you shake President May's hand, you get a picture taken, you're smiling, a very awkward smile. And then you walk down and you go sit down amongst the pews, and there's hundreds of other people walking the stage at the same time. But it feels very epic, you know, and they're playing that God-forsaken song that I hear every time I go to the graduation and gets stuck in your head, plays for hours afterwards. It's got a very epic sense of scale. It builds on intrinsic rewards rather than extrinsic rewards. Obviously, you don't get anything out of education besides a piece of paper, but you don't get money, you don't get fame, you don't get notoriety, you don't get anybody patting you on the back at the end of it. Mainly, you just get a good feeling of accomplishment. I worked my butt off for 4 years. Nobody gets, you didn't get rewarded, you don't get any badges or stickers for going to the library at 10 o'clock at night and working till 3 a.m. You don't get any of that. We don't see that happening. All we see is that you've walked across the stage and you've got a diploma. But you feel the massive sense of success that comes with that. And then, of course, in any good game has a social element to it, and higher education is no different. When you're working with other people in the process, and you feel like you've accomplished something together. Yes, me and my cohorts, me and my peers, me and my best friend, we walked the stage together. We worked for 4 years for this degree. And higher education is brilliantly designed to keep sucking you in and drawing you to do more and more. Because after you graduate, I have my BA, I got my diploma, well, now what? Well, I got to go for my master's degree. I got to go for another 36 hours and write a thesis. If I can do that, I can go for a doctoral degree, go for another 36 hours and write a dissertation. And I can do a dissertation defense. And I can walk across the stage for the 3rd time in a row and get yet another piece of paper, which I have displayed on my walls. It keeps sucking you in to do more and more. And then if you go back to higher education and teach, then it feels a very strong sense of gamification as well. I start off as an assistant professor, then you level up to an associate professor, then you level up to a full professor. And the whole process is it feels very much like a game. And after being in it since I was 18 years of age, I can say that I feel like I've somewhat have beaten the game. Not in the sense that there's anything to beat, but I'm an associate professor, very close to a full professor, and I know how to teach, I know how to research, and I know how to do service at the university, which are the 3 things that people rate me on. So in other words, the game, it feels like a game, even though it's not. And so what gamification does is it taps into that, reconceptualizes the system, shakes it up, and draws out those elements so that it's no longer quite as boring as it would have been without the gamification element. So how can we do that? Let me give you a very brief, simple example of how this works. The English department is in the process of rethinking our ASU's English major. We've had it for a number of years. It's very fragmented. We have several degree plans, a literature track, a creative writing track, an English language learning and linguistic track, a technical and business writing track, and a teacher certification track. We have a lot of tracks. They don't have a lot of intersect. We haven't spent a lot of time as a department working through the nuances of each and how they work together, etc. So if we were to take Anderson's elements of A, design, and B, gamification, and apply it to our degree, well, how might it change? Well, it changes in very subtle but important ways. Remember the study that Anderson references where he's talking about the tetanus shot, and a group of students are sitting around and somebody gives them a lecture on tetanus shot and then says, you need to go get one. And not very many people did. And so they changed it up. They said, here's a map. Write down on the map a time and a date that you're going to go get that tetanus shot, and the number skyrocketed because it gave them a simple measurable outcome. So first of all, it's hard enough to get students to get into our program, to get them to think of an ASU English major as something valuable. So what is the trigger? How do we get them into the program? By telling them how to be in the program. You'll notice that our website, at least in this section, doesn't tell them how to do that. In my experience, I haven't seen any place on the website that does. I get frequently asked by students, they stop by and they say, hey, I'm thinking about signing up for a minor in technical writing. How do I do that? There's no information anywhere on the website that tells them, okay, you want to be a tech writing minor? Here's how you go about changing that and getting that. Notice that the default action is always inaction. Even if I'm unhappy with my current major or minor, I don't really want to seek out how to change it. So I'm going to default toward inaction. But if you want them to go into the action of changing their major to becoming an English major or an English minor, then we need to tell them how to do it. And there needs to be something in a U language right here that says you need to sign up for an English major. And here's that by talking to your advisor or something along those lines. And that needs to be in a high contrast where we can see it, and it's got to have a playful, humorous element or a fun element attached to it. So we got to get them in. We got to draw them into the program first of all. That's the first big challenge. But once we're there, we've got to make them feel like they're a part of a game. Now, how do you do that? First of all, by making things challenging. Page 162. You don't want to make it too easy. If it's too easy, then it's boring. We like challenges. We like to be challenged. We don't want it to be so challenging that we get turned off, But the hardest class that I had when I was a student here was taught by a professor who's still here, and he is known as the hardest professor in the department. And he was very difficult, but I got my A. And to this day, remember, I got that A. And I worked hard for that A. And students remember that. If you give them a challenge, they rise to the occasion and they feel like they've accomplished something. That intrinsic level of success is attached to that. You limit their availability to certain things. Specifically in this case, in a degree plan, it might be limit their access to classes. If you offer the same class every semester, fall, spring, both summer sessions, and it's ubiquitous. And because of that, they don't feel like it's as valuable. Well, I can take that class anytime. But if it comes around once a year, oh, I got to get into that class. And so you make the classes scarce. You give them measures or numerical feedback. We have lots of numbers. We have numbers about how long it takes students to graduate, about how many students have graduated. We have numbers about what their GPAs are, about what their other minors are, how many of them are dual majors, etc. We have tons of numbers. We could quickly turn that into an advertising scheme where it says the average, I don't know what an average is, but the average time for a person to get an English degree is 4.25 years. Let's assume that's the number. If we display that right there, students immediately grab that as a measure of success. And go, I want to go faster. I think I can get 4.1. Or maybe I can finish it in 3.5 years rather than 4.25 years. And so they use those numbers and they turn it into a competition with themselves or with their peers. Feedback loops, when they're taking classes, they need feedback from their peers, they need feedback from their faculty. Faculty are horrible about this. We assign way too many assignments. We don't give them quality feedback on those assignments. And that's all fundamentally students want. Because when they take a class, they want quick turnaround in terms of their feedback so they know how they're doing in the class. Give me a number. Give me some feedback quick so that I know if I'm succeeding or if I'm failing. The social element, we don't encourage that. We don't have a Facebook page for them. We have student group pages, but we don't have an English majors page. To connect them all together, to make them feel connected to each other and to the people around them. With that social interaction. We don't have anything that implies a set completion, meaning that if you take these 4 classes, then you get a special thing. Maybe if you took these 4 classes, you get a tech writing certificate. You take these 4 classes, you get an English language learning and linguistics certificate. You don't have that kind of set completion so that after you've gotten, I've got 3 courses, just need 1 more. I think I can do that. And then a sense of ending, that all of this is gearing up to one big thing. You want to get your diploma and walk out and get a job. It's not hard to take Anderson's ideas and turn them into something that's implementable and make it fun, make it exciting, make it rhetorical, make it seductive, make it emotional, etc. And I'll say one final thing. I think we can do this in other areas of our lives, and we fail at it quite drastically. We can gamify our roles as faculty members. We can gamify our roles as parents. We can gamify our roles as community service workers. We can even gamify something that I think would be very heretical, but you could gamify even the church itself. The Judeo-Christian church could use some of that, because we already have the elements involved. The unnecessary obstacle. Well, you're not getting into heaven unless X. How do you level up? Well, you get salvation. That's the leveling up process. But after you've leveled up, what are you supposed to do now? Well, we need to have an epic sense of scale. And we need to have some intrinsic rewards attached to that and allow people to continue to get stronger and better. I think you can apply these principles in other contexts, and we just haven't done so. Especially not in higher education, or in education in general. I've enjoyed this semester. Thank you for listening. This is Dr. Kevin Garrison signing off. Goodbye.